the stars, oh no. She's got fire where her heart should be. Liberty's call, she answers free. Stepping hills, but she's still inside. No fear, no doubt, she won't hide. Capital lights on a battle cry. A mama lying, watch her eyes. Words are weapons, truth a blade. In the chaos, she's unafraid. Standing tall, she breaks the chain. Crimson faith runs through her veins. Oh, they whisper, you can't change it. She smiles, watch me rearrange it. Every vote, every voice ignite. For the mothers who won't lose sight. Lover Scarlett rising through the storm and smoke. Voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so loud. A freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlett's flame, unbreakable, free. She's the power, the legacy. Moms united, hearts aligned. Defending truth, they will not blind. Children's voices light the sky. They're the reason, they're the why. Born to blaze in the northern snow. Wisconsin roots, watch her grow. Constitution's ink on her soul. Patriot mind control. No, she don't bend, she don't fade. Faith and family foundations laid. From freedom halls to every school. She's the queen who rewrites rule. Every Scarlett rising through the storm and smoke. The voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so wild. A freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlett's flame, unbreakable, free. Mom for liberty, eternally. Mom for liberty, eternally. Red flame shining bright. Scarlett's name, liberty's light. Forever fight. Every Scarlett forever fight. Red flame in the cold night glow. Wisconsin wind and the stars, oh no. She's got fire where her heart should be. Liberty's call, she answers free. Stepping hills, but she's still inside. No fear, no doubt, she won't hide. Capital lights on a battle cry. A mama lying, watch her eyes. Words are weapons, truth a blade. In the chaos, she's unafraid. Standing tall, she breaks the chain. Crimson faith runs through her veins. Oh, they whisper, you can't change it. She smiles, watch me rearrange it. Every vote, every voice ignite. For the mothers who won't lose sight. Lover Scarlett rising through the storm and smoke. Voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so loud. A freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlett's flame, unbreakable, free. She's the power, the legacy. Moms united, hearts aligned. Defending truth, they will not blind. Children's voices light the sky. They're the reason, they're the why. Born to blaze in the northern snow. Wisconsin roots, watch her grow. Constitution's ink on her soul. Patriot mind control. No, she don't bend, she don't fade. Faith and family foundations laid. From freedom halls to every school. She's the queen who rewrites rule. Every scarlet rising through the storm and smoke, a voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so wild, a freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlet flame, unbreakable, free. Mom for liberty, eternally. Mom for liberty, eternally. Red flame shining bright. Scarlet's name, liberty's light, forever fight. Every scarlet forever fight. Red flame in the cold night glow, Wisconsin wind and the stars all know.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson. And today I have a special guest, my friend Meg. I'll bring you up right away. And when I'm doing an interview of you, Meg, it's so casual that and that's what I like, that there's no butterflies in my stomach sometimes. It's like, well, oh, I gotta make sure I get everything right at the beginning. So thank you for coming on for a little bit so that we could talk about some of the big stories from last week and this week, what's going to be a big story, which is the congressional hearing on the Southern Poverty Law Center, which will be held tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And the other story I wanted to talk about was A.B. Hernandez and some of what's going on, the controversy again in California with girls' sports and the inability of these adults to be honest about biological reality. And they're kind of, in the attempt to make everybody happy, they're making nobody happy. Mm-hmm. So they think that they're doing what's equitable or kind or and it's just kind of making everyone mad. So it's kind of ridiculous. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun.
Yes. So let's first talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center. You had a great article we discussed just about 2 weeks ago when the indictment came out. And first, I want to go through legally what they were indicted with. So the SPLC faces federal charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering, with the Department of Justice saying that the group routed more than $3 million to individuals tied to white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups, and they were indicted by a federal grand jury on these 11 counts. So now there is a congressional hearing about SPLC, the group that put Moms for Liberty, PragerU, Turning Point USA, Gays Against Groomers, and so many other conservative organizations on their hate map, labeling them anti-government domestic terrorist organizations. And let's recap a little bit what you discovered and what you wrote about. What implications did those labels have for those of us in these organizations?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was at the Philadelphia Summit in 2023, as I know you were, and I think we really felt the implications. I think that's something that often gets lost in the larger narrative, is how these actions impact normal people. Yep. And so I just remember that summer and being there and how shocking. Well, to be honest, I wasn't that shocked because I'm from Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area, and have seen, I joke that some of the trolls that were there and the protesters were like my personal trolls who showed up at the event. But it was like really discouraging and very unsettling to see people be so hateful, to use the word, really real hate, just because a group of normal parents disagreed with them. And I know there was a time where we were actually going out to dinner, and I was in the first Uber, but you were in the second Uber that kind of got swarmed by protesters. I remember the first night when they had the opening event, and they had to have a whole police escort lining the path from these buses to the museum, and just thinking how crazy it was. So there definitely was a huge impact, particularly for Moms for Liberty. And as I was going back and looking through old articles from that time, it was amazing how they pretty much unanimously cited the SPLC's label of hate group when they were talking about Moms for Liberty. It was almost every article.
So because of this hearing, we were instructed to write letters that would be submitted. And so I forwarded some of the evidence documentation that I had, a lot of which was in your article, but I had forgotten. So I did a search, my name and SPLC, and I had forgotten there was articles. There was the New York Times. There was an article by the Public Broadcasting Network, the local, and an interview of me and one of my friends who's also a member of Moms for Liberty. And they prefaced the entire article, which actually wasn't too bad, but what we were doing in Wisconsin, how we were organizing parents, why school board elections were important. But they prefaced the whole thing, Scarlett Johnson, a leader in Moms for Liberty, an organization labeled as a white supremacist domestic terrorist organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So the whole article, so someone starts to read this article, they see the picture of me and Amber, my friend Amber Schrader, and the whole article is now tainted because right off the bat, they tell you, oh, she was labeled a domestic terrorist by the SPLC, a civil rights organization. They didn't mention that they had over $700 million in offshore accounts. They didn't mention that, even though back then there wasn't these indictments, there were John Stossel had done this very good report on suspected fraud and the way that they were weaponizing their status, their early beginnings. They were fighting for civil rights, but now that they were weaponizing their power and creating enemies lists and using that power, creating these labels. So, like the Biden Department of Justice could maybe surveil us, or they could, there were things that could happen. At the very least, lose elections, credibility, and make it harder for anyone to ally with us. I mean, to the point where even Republicans didn't want us to speak at committee hearings because it was too problematic, or they didn't want to be seen with us because even though we like you and we agree on, oh yeah, we're secretly by your side, to be seen with us in public, that was a little too tricky for them back in this time. And you wrote about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the articles that I found, a representative from the SPLC alluded to, the SPLC had alluded to the fact that was part of their intent, was to make it really difficult for Moms for Liberty and other groups to really network with people, because it is such a strong label. And obviously we think about groups that are actual hate groups and they're disgusting. Nobody wants to be associated with them because they're gross. But to put parents who just have a different opinion on the same playing field is just an egregious lie. And it's you could argue that's just like a political cheap shot that unfortunately, because of the climate we're in and the media climate we're in, with so much of like legacy media leaning so far left, that label kind of gets used as a sword to defeat your enemies for just having, you guys are just advocating at school boards about things like masks, gender ideology. I mean, it's kind of interesting to go back in time when you were given that label. The LGBTQ propaganda was a big part of why people were so upset. And you think about how public opinion has really largely turned on that, where I think it's almost 80% of Americans agree, like, no, we don't want men in women's sports. Like, no, we shouldn't be cutting off the breasts of young women. That's wrong. That's egregious. And so it's just interesting to kind of time warp and think about what the environment was then to now, and how so many of these accusations just 3 years later, most people, if presented with the information, would be like, that's not even, I know that's not accurate.
And now it wasn't necessarily the SPLC, I'm not sure, but you have personal experience. You're not just a reporter. You got started as an advocate in Philadelphia, in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and you experienced everything that we experienced and then some, because you found out what was happening and you did your investigative work and you learned how to do open records requests. But and you guys in Bucks County had success, but bring in your kind of personal story. Like, how did even just the labeling, this kind of labeling, how did that affect you and what you were trying to do, and make the success that happened earlier harder to continue? The longevity wasn't there because a lot of Republicans were kind of like, you're a little too spicy for us. How did this?
Yeah, well, I remember getting ready to, I spoke at the 2023 summit. I've never actually been a Moms for Liberty member, but the Moms for Liberty was so hated in the Philadelphia area. I don't know why, but there's a lot of hate, that basically anybody who didn't have a far left point of view was labeled as Moms for Liberty. And I remember before the summit, there were a lot of serious safety concerns. And I think given what we've seen happen in this escalation of political violence, I think those concerns were very valid. I think you and I have been to situations locally that have been scary or uncomfortable, and really realized the level of real hate people have and the dehumanization. I mean, I think that's a big part of it that doesn't get talked about, is that it's really a tactic of dehumanizing people. So if you truly believe someone is a member of the KKK, then might feel like you have the right to then take really extreme actions. And I think that's such a big part that doesn't get talked about, especially when you're the person on the ground being dehumanized. It does raise real safety concerns. So I remember being like, a little concerned, as everyone was. I mean, you guys had a lot of security at that event for good reason. And there were still people on the right who were comparing Moms for Liberty to being like as extreme as Antifa. And I just remember thinking, like, what are you even talking about? Like, these are moms who go to school board, parents, moms and dads who go to school board meetings.
Juxtaposition, right? Like, and us all, we're dressed nice. We have our kids with us. Some of the members brought kids with them. Look normal, like just the normal woman you'd see at the grocery store, but labeled, white supremacist, labeled extreme. And yet all around us, hundreds of these protesters were, I mean, if you look at the video, there's just weird. I mean, odd and swearing and cussing, profane signs, dressed, like they were going clubbing at a trans drag queen story time event. and so that kind of like contrast. So here's these moms and, and dressed, well kept, nice, they're being polite. And then on the other hand, you have these groups that are calling us the haters, yet they're the ones that are spewing hate, and just saying horrible, demeaning things and trying to provoke action, doing everything they can to provoke a response. Like they're all the cameras are just waiting for them to say something so offensive that one of us is going to respond. And they didn't get that. They didn't get what they were looking for. But we have a lot of video of them. And to this day, Meg, when I was putting up video with with your article, with posts, the videos were they had labels on them, warning labels, shadow banned. So to this day, the same videos that were completely shadow banned. I mean, that's another component we didn't talk about last time, but all of my reporting from the 2023 convention, the summit, the Moms for Liberty Summit, had me completely shadow banned for 2 weeks. I had to keep petitioning. Like no one could see my account. Simply because of that event. When I put up the images of the protesters back in 2023, July 2023, I was completely shadow banned. And that was right before Elon Musk bought X. And so not only were we labeled, and not only was the mainstream media not telling our story, but we couldn't tell our story. Every time we tried to, we would be banned, cut off of social media. So it was hard to tell the truth. It was really hard to tell the truth back in that time.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a wild time. And thankfully that no one was hurt, which is really the biggest win. And I remember everyone had a great time. It was a great event.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I think that's, again, comes down to that dehumanization aspect. I mean, we as Americans who love the Constitution believe everyone has the right to protest, to raise their voice, even if they disagree. But I think there's a real difference between believing someone, arguing on ideas and whether or not an idea is a good thing or a policy is a good thing versus I disagree with you, you're an evil person. Because when you go that route, then you really, I think that's a lot of why we're seeing this terrible, terrible increase in political violence, because of this dehumanization piece that is very easy for people to do on the internet, unfortunately.
So yes, and there are the consequences of the SPLC hate group label on us and obviously Turning Point, Charlie Kirk, dehumanizing him. That had horrible consequences. Words matter, labels matter, and dehumanizing someone for their political beliefs or their religious beliefs is wrong. And in this climate, it can create violent, terrible situations. I think I've always said that the media plays such a big role in all of this, because when the threats, the protests, the doxing, the reputational harm, when they do not talk about that, they don't talk about the very real things that are happening to members of conservative groups, or even the president of the United States, when they just scratch the surface, they don't really report on it. And then they repeat lies from groups like SPLC as neutral facts. They just repeat them. They will take the talking points and the press releases and just, repeat it without without looking at them critically, without pausing. Because if I were to put out a Moms for Liberty press release and I were to claim that a group on the left was a radical, anti-government domestic terrorist organization, I mean, do you think CNN would just repeat it? No, they wouldn't. They probably wouldn't even mention it, because they think that's a group with a dog in a fight. They have an agenda. We're not going to repeat it. But they will repeat these other talking points by groups that they know have an agenda, that they have no interest in neutrality. They have a very strong political agenda. So
Mhm.
I think that your piece exposed some of that. So very grateful
Mhm.
for it.
Mm. Yeah, no,
And
I definitely, to just follow up on your point, saw that when I was going back and reading all these articles. I was actually, I mean, I knew that people had mentioned it, but I was surprised at how consistent it was, that really was such a big deal.
yeah, and it was just repeated again and again. Anytime you saw Moms for Liberty, this label as a fact, as it was a neutral fact that everyone knew, that this is, you couldn't even contest it. They didn't qualify it in any way, and that's what was really hard. And another way the media is, again, not doing their job reporting. I'll bring this up. We were talking about the A.B. Hernandez stories. So this is MSN. A.B. Hernandez, a male, a biological male that identifies as female and is competing not only in California track and field events, competing against women in all female categories, is forced to share first place with cisgender girls at a track meet. She jumped higher than any other girl and took first place. But a state athletic policy enacted last year forced transgender athletes to share the podium. I mean, you would read that and they are pretending. They are not being honest. That this is a biological male who went through male puberty, has all the advantages of a male that goes through male puberty, and yes, is running literal circles around the girls. And how unfair it is that he has to share a podium with a biological girl instead of the other way around.
It reminds me of, I forget who said it. There was a politician who said, "Stop cisgendering me." And I thought that was so good, because that's exactly how I feel. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, yeah, you're talking about women's sports, girls' sports. The idea that there is outrage that a male is having to share the podium with females in the female category of sports is just ridiculous. I mean, it's the upside down. It makes no sense. It's literally why we have male and female sports. If he doesn't want to share the podium with girls, the option would be then to go compete with the other males. I mean, it's really backwards.
And here's the image. I mean, so here we go. They're sharing. I mean, again, like I said, when we started, no one is made happy, because those of us fighting for Title IX and biological reality are very unhappy that there's a male up on the podium, that he's even allowed to compete. And then his mom and trans activists are upset that the quote unquote cisgender female, the real woman, is up there, that she didn't win, he won, because he identifies as a woman, because his feelings matter more than biological reality. And so no one is made happy by what's happening. And I think the fact that I agree with Riley Gaines, if you have to create the shared podium for a boy competing in the girls' event, like she said, you've already admitted that that he is not a girl. You're already admitting that there is a difference, that this isn't fair, but you're doing it anyway. You're doing it because of the ideology. I think this is an admission. We know that we're doing something wrong. We know that this isn't fair, but how do you like them apples? We're just gonna keep on, allowing these men to compete in all female categories, and they don't care about the warnings and the executive orders. How is this going to end? How are we finally going to stop this madness?
Yeah, I mean, I think it brings up something that I've thought for a long time of why is this issue of gender ideology so important? And I think it's because it's one of those bedrock truths that if we don't have any universal truths, like, you can't function as a society. And I think that's what we're really seeing here in this story, is that this is a total sum game. Either there are two legal categories of male and female, or there aren't. And that's really it. It's like, there is no room for nuance or for multiple worldviews. It's either there are men and women, or there are men, women, and something else. And that's it. And I mean, we're really just seeing, I mean, I'm sure you heard about the case that happened in Australia where they're eradicating women as a legal category. I mean, that's essentially what's happening. If any man can just say, hey, I think I'm a woman, I feel my gender identity, I'm sure your listeners have heard that term, but that is one of the bedrocks of gender ideology, is a belief that as a human being, you're disassociated, meaning that you have a sex and you have something called a gender identity, which is circularly defined, doesn't really, a very ambiguous term, which ultimately just means how someone feels about their sex. Yeah. And at the heart of it is this belief that your feelings about your sex can determine your sex, which in any other era, we would say that's like a sign of something's not, like you're not making sense mentally, you're disassociating who you are. But today, that's what you're seeing when you see men saying, I feel like a woman, I feel my gender identity is female. And then that opens the door for them to have all of the legal rights of being a woman. What you've essentially just done is you've erased the sexes. There is no legal female category. And that's why this is so important, because how can we function as a society if we can't even, how do we protect our children, our daughters? I mean, I think about how crazy the world already is. And then you think like sending your daughter to, I mean, you have girls, into a world where a man can just come into her bathroom. Like, what if she's alone somewhere in the bathroom and a man walks in? I mean, that's an unsafe situation for a woman. You know, we all know this, you know,
that is a whole different category. So with this podium, by sharing the podium, there is an admission that girls are being displaced. There's an admission that if we allow the results of this race to stand, which had A.B. Hernandez as the winner, the clear winner, this boy, they didn't allow him to stand on that podium alone this time. In previous years, several times they have, because there's an acknowledgement, we are displacing girls. We know that what we're doing isn't fair, so they're trying to somehow make it fair. I think this is like a humiliation ritual, and the girls forced to stand there with him and then take a picture and smile. It's part of this humiliation ritual. And then when they do stand there and they smile and they put that, they're trying to normalize this. Like, look at it's okay. It's okay. You know, because they're obviously, they have their medals, everyone's fine. It's okay. Now they're sharing a podium, so everyone's happy. But no, because the truth is being subverted. This isn't real. We can't think, well, okay, this is a you know, here's a good happy medium. This is a resolution. Maybe nobody's happy. I think Jordan Peterson is correct in his many, many lectures about truth, that when you live a lie this big, it eats at your soul and it destabilizes it. This kind of a lie can destabilize a civilization. And this is a civilizational issue. We allow this to succeed, we will lose our civilization.
Yeah, I mean, you need something has to be true. And I think about the girls too. Like, there's so many elements of this. I mean, how hard these girls have worked. You know, these are athletes. They've given so much time and so much discipline to achieve what they've achieved. And you're basically telling them, you're teaching them that hard work doesn't matter. I mean, that someone else can cheat and have an advantage and just take your win away from you. But then I also think you're teaching girls I always think as a woman that, you know, adolescence is a moving into adulthood. You're moving from childhood to adulthood. And part of that is kind of like Eve biting the apple. Like, you start to realize things about the world that are uncomfortable or scary or having to navigate situational danger. And I think that you have these instincts, and we need to teach our girls to hone their instincts for environmental safety. Like, don't walk through a parking lot at night. Like, you know, if someone's making you uncomfortable, like, get up and leave. But here you are in a situation where these girls are having to share a podium, and I'm sure feeling incredibly uncomfortable. And to your point, society is training them to don't listen to that voice inside. You need to overcome your discomfort and embrace something that you inherently know is wrong and, unsafe. And I think we don't have any idea what that's going to do long term to these young women.
And sharing a podium, like that is morally wrong. Forcing these girls to be humiliated is wrong. But sharing a bathroom could turn out to be harmful, like actual physical harm, sexual abuse, psychological damage, making girls shower next to biological males. All of these things now opens up to actual like physical harm. And so that's more than a humiliation ritual. That is just plain dumb. And you're asking for real trouble, like forcing women to be in prison stalls with biological males with a violent past. Oftentimes they are in jail because of sexual abuse and assault. They say, oh, I feel like a woman. And now they're in the prison. Now these women, these poor women that are just forgotten. They're like, just because they're in prison, like we're going to dehumanize them. Okay, who cares if we throw men in jail cells? Who cares if they get abused because they're in prison? It's very sad for me. The lengths that these woke activists will go and how far they're willing to betray women.
It's heartbreaking. No, I mean, I reported on some of the stuff going on with the prisons, and you're right, it's very underreported. And it's so heartbreaking because you think of how many of these women who are in prison have a high likelihood of having experienced some sort of sexual trauma or sexual assault in their past. And now you're making a woman who's vulnerable, who potentially has a history of sexual assault, share a prison cell with a man who may very well have a history of sexual violence. And you think of the psychological torture of that. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's why gender ideology, it really is such an important issue. And I hope and pray that at some point we won't have to talk about it anymore, because we'll have just figured it out and we'll have protected women as a legal class in all these scenarios, whether it's in sports, in prisons, at schools, because it really is such an important issue.
Well, in closing, will you be watching the SPLC hearing tomorrow, or at least listening to it? I think I'll be watching it, kind of my job, but I'm very interested in this committee hearing because it's personal for me, obviously. But I want to see justice. I really hope that the SPLC, I hope there are consequences, not real consequences, so that this just stops happening. And that if there's another administration, that we don't just go right back. They don't just pick up right where they left off and we go backwards. Like, we need to see real consequences so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
No, absolutely. Yeah. There's another one, I think, on Thursday about gender medicine. So it's a big week to listen in, see what we learn. And hopefully they'll, like you're saying, hopefully there'll be some real action and we can kind of write the course. And
I wasn't aware of the one on Thursday. So I'll
I'm pretty sure it's Thursday. But I'll be listening to that one as well.
Yeah, there was just a big kind of disappointing ruling out of Colorado. Not surprising for Colorado. They're just if you talk to Erin Lee, who lives there, it's deeply problematic, but hopefully she is going to successfully, she got those measures on the ballot, protecting girls' sports and protecting parental rights, and hopefully those pass in the next election. But and we're all waiting on the Supreme Court. There's two big cases, and those will have a direct bearing on what's happening with AB Hernandez. Those are two cases that I think will definitely, if decided the way that many of the legal scholars that we work with and that have done such good work fighting for women and girls and fighting for biological reality. If things turn out the way that we hope, that will be another win for us. It won't end all of this, but it'll move us closer to the goal of finally institutionally defending Title IX and the definition of sex to mean male and female, and that's it. So hopefully,
always lots going on, lots to pay attention to, right?
Yep. Hopefully we hear good news soon. All right. Well, thanks, Meg, for coming on. I'm going to talk next to Tyler O'Neill. We'll really dig into the SPLC angle. He is the expert on all of this, but I really appreciate coming on and giving your perspective. And I'll put links to your article, which was very good.
Great. Thank you so much, Scarlett.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. Today on Unleashed, we're joined by Tyler O'Neill, senior investigative reporter for the Daily Signal and author of Making Hate Pay: The Corruption of the Southern Poverty Law Center. This conversation could not be more timely, as tomorrow, the House Judiciary Committee is holding a hearing titled The Southern Poverty Law Center Manufacturing Hate. For years, the SPLC has positioned itself as the authority on hate and extremism in America. But Tyler has been warning for years that the SPLC's model depends on something that he calls hate inflation. In his recent Daily Signal piece, Tyler argues that the SPLC raises money by presenting itself as the expert on combating hate, then expands the definition of hate to include mainstream conservatives, Christians, parental rights groups like Moms for Liberty, PragerU, even targeting Charlie Kirk and his organization Turning Point USA. And we all know how that dehumanization of Charlie Kirk, where that led, that dark road. This label, it's not harmless. There are very real victims. I know because I was one of them. And that's why I'm so grateful for all of the work that Tyler has done exposing the SPLC. And we're going to bring him on right now. I'm sure he feels very vindicated of late since the recent federal indictment of the SPLC. So Tyler, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Scarlett.
How did you feel when the FBI and DOJ held that press conference announcing that the grand jury had come back and SPLC was indicted? So could you talk a little bit about that and how that made you feel, considering the amount of time and effort you had put into exposing SPLC?
Yeah, I think vindicated is a very good word. I've been following this for years, noting how the SPLC inflates hate and exaggerates, the amount of hate that is in America today. And, to see in black and white a federal indictment charging the SPLC with lying to its donors. And then also, I mean, let's not forget lying to a bank here. When they opened accounts, and they said, and this is in black and white in the indictment, where an employee goes to a bank and says, I am the owner and proprietor of this establishment, be it Fox Photography or whatever the name of the alias, shell company is. They say, I'm the owner. And then a few years later, the bank is asking questions, and suddenly the CEO of the Southern Poverty Law Center sends in an affidavit saying all of these accounts, and the accounts are listed, including the ones where the employee clearly said, I am the owner, were operated on behalf of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And if you ask me, that is black and white bank fraud. But, this just echoes the concerns that I and so many others have been raising for years. I mean, I was just going over some of the research that was in my book, and there was somebody on the left who's actually an open, avowed socialist who was complaining about the SPLC and said this looked like a case of fraud to him, where they were just artificially inflating hate to lie to their donors to make more money. And, this is a criticism that was not unique to me, but I really built on it. I wrote a full book-length expose explaining how the Southern Poverty Law Center went from a noble civil rights organization to a defamation smear factory that, it routinely puts good people on a map with Klan chapters, a map it says shows the infrastructure upholding white supremacy in the United States.
Yep.
And that has led to violent attacks, and it has led so many good people to lose their reputations. Yep. And I couldn't stand for it then, and I really can't stand for it now.
And that was the goal, reputational harm. When Moms for Liberty was added to the SPLC's hate map and labeled a domestic terrorist organization, an anti-government institution, white supremacy, that smear followed moms like me into news stories, into school board meetings, school board races. It had an effect on even Republicans back early on in 2022 and 2023, establishment Republicans that were afraid to be seen in photos with us, that, that were concerned that we were just a little bit too radical, or they didn't want to deal with the fallout of being associated with Moms for Liberty. That is definitely not the case now. But that back then, it was for some, it made it difficult for us to go testify in state houses. It even affected our relationship with law enforcement. So the point wasn't just disagreement. It was to cause reputational harm so that other conservatives wouldn't even want to work with groups like ours. And I believe they targeted us and Turning Point and PragerU. They targeted groups that were becoming successful, that were breaking out of the echo chamber, and that were finally, opening the eyes of what we would call, the normies, the normal people that don't get too involved in politics. But during COVID, they started to see that, wait, there's some strange things happening. They're coming after my kids. I don't like what I'm seeing in the curriculum. I can actually hear now, because it's virtual learning, what they're learning, and it's concerning to me. So in order to sort of to stop us, to stop our success, they put this label on us, and they caused this harm. All the while, they're funding the same groups, the same hate groups that they accuse us of belonging to. It just blows my mind.
Well, and the very reason why the attacks against Moms for Liberty, the attacks against PragerU, Turning Point, it stings when you're put on a hate map with chapters of the Klan, because this is the organization that gained its reputation by suing the Klan into bankruptcy. And then, but the fact of the matter is, and now we know from this indictment, so when I saw the news of the indictment, I didn't see the press conference first. I saw the SPLC getting out in front of it. I saw the current chairman and CEO of the SPLC, Brian Fair, come out with his own video and announce to the world that the SPLC had an informant network, which, is kind of flabbergasting news. I mean, many of us suspected that they might have something like this, but to see the SPLC come out and say it point blank was quite something. To see him defend it as they were saving lives. And then, the most surprising thing about all of it is that he said they no longer operated the informant network. And, there are so many questions I have about this. One of them is, well, if you had the informant network, when did you decide to close the informant network?
Yep.
Because if it was saving lives as you claim, then at what point did it no longer save lives? And why did you close it? And the other aspect of this is, an informant network is you paying members of groups like the Klan. So it wasn't directly like the SPLC is paying the Ku Klux Klan. It's the SPLC is paying Joe Blow, who's a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And the SPLC claims that Joe Blow is a secret agent against the Klan, really for the SPLC. There are a lot of weaknesses with that claim, because if you look at the actual statements in the indictment, for instance, Charlottesville, if the SPLC had known that something like Charlottesville was going to happen, and if their informant program was really aimed at fighting hate, at deflecting hate, at diffusing hate and preventing violence before it happened, you might expect that the SPLC would either tip off law enforcement, would try to get the person away from Charlottesville, would say, look, you did your informant duty in warning us. Let's get you out of there. Let's make it safe for you. Let's make it safe for other people. No, what happens, according to the indictment, now we'll have to see what the SPLC says in response to this, but the SPLC was supposedly directing this guy's racist postings, or girl, we don't know the actual sex of the person, but they were directing the racist postings. And according to the indictment, it very heavily suggests that Charlottesville was a bigger event because of the SPLC funding this person than it otherwise would have been, which stands to reason because the SPLC, Charlottesville was a bonanza for the SPLC. They got millions upon millions of dollars. They got social media companies to immediately say we're going to silence people based on them being on the hate map. And they had CNN plastering the hate map all over their website. And of course, this was before they added Moms for Liberty to the hate map. But even back then, they had the Family Research Council, they had Alliance Defending Freedom, they had the Center for Immigration Studies. I mean, they had a whole bunch of conservative and Christian nonprofits that are peaceful, that advocate for policies which the SPLC disagrees with. And that's the main thing that always gets me, is that this is a 1-2 punch. On the one hand, the SPLC can go to their donors and say, we're fighting hate. We're the number one force fighting hate. And hate is worse than it's ever been before. So you need to give us money. And on the other hand, they can use their hate map as a cudgel to silence those who disagree with the SPLC's leftist agenda. And as the SPLC got more radical, more and more of the groups targeted became ever more mainstream, to the point, I mean, I don't know where they go from here now that they put Turning Point and they put Moms for Liberty on the map. I mean, I'm thinking they almost have to put the Heritage Foundation on there at this point if they're going to be consistent. But we know they're not consistent because they don't put the Roman Catholic Church on there.
If you are for colorblind policies, if you don't believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking at the world through the lens of race and privilege, then to them, you're a white supremacist. It's this false dichotomy. You're either with us or you're this other thing. And I think that they really go after groups that have kind of boots on the ground, if they've got sort of a grassroots component to them and they're getting involved in elections, well, for us, we're involved in school board elections, and we were becoming very successful at it and winning. And I think it felt to me like it was, we have to stop this. We have to stop this movement. Tina Deskovich has said, she's wondered, how big would we be were it not for this label? How many more school board races could we have won? How much more could we have done? This label, it made donors, some donors shied away. They were worried about donating to us back then. It really, they really attempted to shut us down. And a lot of people thought that they might be successful, but we're fighting for our kids. And it made moms like myself and about 130,000 other moms across America more determined to stay in the fight, knowing what we were up against. And I'm so proud to stand alongside so many of the women and the dads that I have, because we, at the end, we have prevailed. They are under indictment, and here we are doing the good work. We continue proving every day that we are not any of those labels that they tried to assign to us. But still, the Biden administration was able to take that label and politicize it. And I want to know more. I want to know more about any kind of collusion between the SPLC and the Biden administration. Do you think that there is something there? Do you think we can learn more?
Oh yeah, we have learned tons already. So my first book was about the SPLC in particular. My second book was about how leftist groups like the SPLC called the shots in the Biden administration, because I saw, even during that administration, FOIA documents. I saw a leaked presentation from SPLC President Margaret Huang, who was bragging that many agencies in the Biden administration came to her to ask for advice on how to combat the domestic terrorism threat. And this is happening at the same time as they're starting to look at Moms for Liberty, at the same time as, the White House, the Biden White House was looking at, how do we go after following January 6th. And when you see so much of that administration, so when it comes to the SPLC, they had dozens of White House meetings. They had one of their attorneys named to a top federal judgeship. They were cited by the FBI in that notorious radical traditional Catholic memo, where they went after Catholics. The Richmond FBI office and then other FBI offices also helped with that. But worse, there have been even more documents that came out since my second book, when all of that had been exposed. Now we also learn that DOJ prosecutors were actually being briefed by SPLC staff. In fact, there's an SPLC staffer whose name is R.G. Cravens. And this is the guy on their hate team who went out when they decided to put Focus on the Family on the hate map. And they call Focus on the Family an anti-LGBTQ plus hate group. R.G. Cravens is the guy who defended that in public. And R.G. Cravens said of the Christian doctrine against LGBTQ issues, and this is not everybody in your audience may believe this, but this is the traditional Christian perspective, is that, sexual morality says it should be reserved for a man and a woman in marriage. That's the ideal. That's, there are all sorts of other life situations that may happen. But ultimately, the traditional Christian perspective has been that marriage is between one man and one woman, and that you can't change from being a boy to being a girl or vice versa. R.G. Craven said of that traditional Christian doctrine that it is both false and dangerous. And therefore, you have this guy who is saying that what Christians have believed for 2,000 years is effectively evil. And then he's the guy who's training DOJ prosecutors under the Biden administration. So like the Civil Rights Division had a big powwow where they brought all sorts of prosecutors together, and he's the guy who is teaching them specifically about the anti-LGBTQ plus movement. So that's how far it got. We also had, the head of the Civil Rights Division, Kristen Clark. She was meeting with SPLC staff and actually asked for advice on civil rights matters from the head of the SPLC. So like all of this is happening. By the way, when they put Moms for Liberty on the hate map, the SPLC first gave an embargoed copy of that new hate map to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. So
Wow.
this is how close they were connecting with them. And of course, that only came, a year or 2 years after the infamous National School Boards Association memo that compared concerned parents to domestic terrorists directly. And so this whole demonization of the parental rights movement, and this is something we really can't afford to forget, because until the left clearly disavows this rhetoric, until they disavow the Southern Poverty Law Center, until they disavow this, they're stuck with this history where they demonized moms and dads who are frustrated that schools were closed for too long, who are frustrated that their kids were forced to wear masks, who are frustrated that their kids were forced to get vaccinated, and who are frustrated, as you noted, that their kids were being indoctrinated with transgender ideology and critical race theory and told that you cannot question these things. And by the way, like, transgender ideology is very noxious and dangerous. Right now, thank God, under the Trump administration, we have a Department of Health and Human Services that was willing to look at the data and say, well, no, actually, there isn't any evidence that so-called gender-affirming care produces good outcomes. What we do see is this growing trend of detransitioners who say, I was harmed by the medical establishment that rushed me to alter my body to make it appear like the opposite sex based on something in my head. I mean, it's insane. If you had to explain this to somebody 20 years ago, they would not have believed you. But even back then, the SPLC was pushing this agenda.
Yep. So at that time, the Biden administration, they were treating the SPLC as a neutral expert, as if they had no dog in the fight. They weren't a political, ideological organization that had an agenda, and they had a seat at the table in the Biden administration, and I would guess also in the Obama administration. And even way back, I remember watching John Stossel do a report about the SPLC and the Family Research Council and what their dehumanization and weaponization of their labels, what they were doing. All the while, they had like over $700 million in an offshore account somewhere. So they are making money. They're profiting from what they're doing, and dividing this country. And instead of healing the divides or kind of showing that America has become, in my opinion, and I'm Puerto Rican, that we have become a more colorblind society, but they are stoking people to see, they want people to see race because they don't want this issue to die. It's too politically profitable for them.
Well, and so much of the left is coasting off of the false impression that we haven't really made progress since the civil rights movement. That, and this is the irony of ironies here is that the Southern Poverty Law Center did not exist during the height of the civil rights movement. The Southern Poverty Law Center was founded in 1971, after most of the big civil rights events had happened in the 1960s. And the Southern Poverty Law Center didn't start suing the Ku Klux Klan until the 1980s. When they did so, by the way, the Klan was a paper tiger. This is what the attorneys at the SPLC said. They said suing the Klan was like shooting fish in a barrel, and they didn't want to do it. But Morris Dees realized that he could make boatloads of money going to donors, especially Northern Democratic donors, and saying, look, we're fighting hate in the bigoted South. Send us your money. And they would make tons of cash. And so what you see in the number one case that the SPLC always talks about, it's the case of Michael Donald, who he was lynched by Klansmen. I mean, it's a righteous case to sue these people into bankruptcy. But the Klansmen at the time, this was the 1980s. So America had gotten a lot better. And by the way, it's a lot less racist than it was in the 80s too today. Like today, I think the main problem we have with racism is from the left trying to gin up some conflict here. And unfortunately,
Yeah, good. And false flag operations are a reality. At least, especially 2023, 2024, there would be events where suddenly, there'd be a prayer vigil or a protest of drag queen story time that was peaceful. And I personally witnessed a situation in which this small group of young men wearing masks and waving Nazi flags came in to try and pose pictures with us. And we're like, get away. We don't want you. And we're calling the police, take them away. And they had a camera crew with them. And they stayed for 15 minutes. The camera crew records everything, and we're like, get out, chasing them out. We want you, and then they disperse with the camera crew. And we knew right away, this is a false flag operation. And of course, the next day, what do you see in the Madison local paper? That parent groups that are protesting drag queen story time join with, yes. Yeah. Even though we talked to every reporter, we have no idea, we have no affiliation, and they knew it. They knew what was happening. They knew that this was all a staged show. But again, they and the Southern Poverty Law Center would say, see, yeah, that's a hate group. We told you that was a hate group. We would be able to prove it was very obvious. I've heard this many, many times, many other groups. This happened with Turning Point. Whenever there was an event, especially, before Trump winning his presidency, and it just made me sick. It made me sick. And I wonder about how the SPLC played a part in this, just by giving that permission structure, that it's okay to attack these moms. It's okay to say hateful, horrible things, to cuss and swear at these moms because they're white supremacists. This sort of permission structure given by them to dehumanize us was heartbreaking. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I cried and felt just so terrible and isolated, and it's just not fair.
Well, it reminds me of what the Lincoln Project did in Virginia a few years back, where they had a bunch of guys dressed up to look like Confederates, and they went and posed with a Republican campaign van. Yes. That they were essentially just like, and all, like, we all know, and this is the thing that drives me crazy, is like, when Charlottesville happened, Ed Gillespie, who was running for governor in Virginia, couldn't be loud enough in condemning it, in saying like, oh, this is not what Virginians stand for. This is not what conservatives, this is not what Republicans stand for. None of that mattered. The Democratic Party of Virginia still had their flyers that they sent everywhere, plastering his face right next to the Charlottesville Tiki Torch marchers. And it didn't matter that there was absolutely no truth to it. This was their political weapon, and they used it. And now we know that one of the organizers of Charlottesville was on the SPLC's payroll. And I mean, we have to see how this comes out in the indictment. But the fact that the SPLC did not deny the fact that they were paying these people already speaks volumes. Tomorrow when I'm testifying, I'm going to be testifying alongside Maya Wiley of the Leadership Conference for Civil Rights. And she is going to be defending the Southern Poverty Law Center from these charges. She's already done so in public many times. And I think it's going to be very interesting where things go, because we've heard from the left over and over. They say that the indictment is weak, But I'm looking at these charges and I'm seeing in black and white, at the very least, that the SPLC, their staffers lied when they opened these accounts with the bank. I mean, that's plain as day. And then you have these claims, and we'll have to see what the underlying evidence is. But if it is true that the SPLC was directing these racist posts, if it is true, as I find very likely, that the SPLC was paying somebody and also featuring them on their website in an extremist profile, I mean, that screams to high heaven how dirty that is. Like and sure, the SPLC claims that these were just informants and that some of their information led to a few different charges in court and a few different convictions. They've pointed to 2 examples. I'm like, okay, let's have that discussion. Let's hear exactly what you were doing with these people, because maybe in a few cases this was justified, but that doesn't mean that every case was. And many of these cases, the ones that are listed in the indictment, don't seem above board to me. And until the SPLC can explain why the indictment is false on those things, then the SPLC, they're innocent until proven guilty. They'll have their day in court, but the indictment still looks very bad for them. And I think we're going to hear a lot more as this case develops.
So now there's a pipeline, the SPLC pipeline. They publish a label, and what everyone should know is they don't just publish the hate map one and done. If you look to their website, they constantly put out press releases and news publications. They update their newsletters, and Moms for Liberty, Turning Point, they were absolutely obsessed with our organizations, constantly doing profiles of our leaders. I mean, every newsletter had some mention of Moms for Liberty or Turning Point or other conservative organizations, especially since they became obsessed with if you were against having boys and girls bathrooms or boys playing on all female teams, then you were that also made you a white supremacist, anti-government, domestic terrorist. Or if you did not want sexualized books in the hands of kindergartners in their kindergarten class, that made you a book banner, so these labels mean something, and they are perpetuated by constant newsletters that they send out to their donors, that they issue to mainstream press, that they put out on their newsletters, and all of this material is disseminated down and used by the Democrat Party, used by other organizations, even shared with teachers and school boards, because the SPLC not only do they engage in all of their activities, they create curriculum, learning for justice, teaching tolerance. They create K-12 curriculum, and they even develop social emotional learning curriculum. That means they get mental health dollars, grants given by the federal government for mental health. They translate what they do into a curriculum, a mental health curriculum for very small children. So that's a new revelation for me over the last year, understanding how deep this rot goes, that it's in the schools, literally in the schools.
Well, and this is the thing. I'm so glad you brought this up, because they don't just publish a hate map and call it one and done. Like you were saying, they publish newsletters, they publish the curriculum, but they also go to companies and say, like, these groups are on the hate map. You should prevent your charitable dollars from going there. They go to banks. They publish a thing with the Council on American Islamic Relations called Hate-Free Philanthropy, where multiple years they've gone and said to all sorts of charitable engines like Fidelity, like Vanguard, hey, you need to prevent donor money from going to these organizations because they're hate maps or they're hate groups. And they do this, they do it all across the board. So when it comes to social media, they had a thing called the Change the Terms Coalition, where they were going to social media companies and saying, you need to change your terms of service to prevent hate groups from using your social media platform. It's like social media, companies, banks, like schools, it's everywhere. And they're like, so that's the thing. Some people ask me like, oh, why do you write a book about one organization? Well, I wrote a book about an organization that has an endowment of $822 million that is bigger. I mean, for context, this is almost twice the size of the assets of Planned Parenthood. This is 3 times the size of the YMCA, the National YMCA. 3 times the size of the National YMCA is the Southern Poverty Law Center. So this, and like you said, this is a group that has offshore accounts. It used to have accounts in the Cayman Islands. We don't know where the accounts are now because their latest 990 just says they have a boatload of money in Central America and the Caribbean, but I highly suspect it's probably still in the Cayman Islands. And you ask yourself, why do they have this money? What are they doing with this money? They're a nonprofit, right? This is a nonprofit that has a union that stands credibly accused of union busting against that union. Like, if you go down a list, like the list of SPLC scandals is Mad Libs. It is racial discrimination, sexual harassment, union busting, hate for pay, inspiring terrorist attacks. Like, you go down, it is hard to not come up with a scandal that the SPLC has not had.
Wow. That's crazy. When you brought up the fact that they go to institutions with their hate map and with their stories, it reminded me that during the 2024 Republican convention, where President Trump was going to accept the nomination for president in July, that was in my home state of Wisconsin, the venue that Moms for Liberty had contracted in order so that we could have an event that would include President Trump. That venue at the last minute said they denied our contract. They said, you can't have your event here anymore because of the SPLC label, because there was so much pressure put upon the company that owned the venue that they just said, forget it.
Was
Here's
that
your
Hyatt
money
by
back.
chance?
It wasn't a Hyatt. It was a different group. But then where we moved to have our event, they were harassed, but that group said, okay, forget it. We're gonna stick with you. That venue stuck with us. Whenever we announce that we're going to have a summit, there's always a campaign to get like we were just at the Gaylord, whether we're with various different groups, there's always this huge campaign to kick us out. Don't house. And you saw that with the No ICE movement in Minnesota, that they have moved to these campaigns where they go, they'll go to the car rental companies, they'll go to the hotel that you're staying at, they'll go to the local restaurants, and they'll say, you can't serve, don't serve these fascists. And they hound and harass them in the hopes that all the private businesses will just say, we don't want this trouble anymore. Just make it stop, make it go away. And so they are engaging in hate. They are engaging in harassing, and they're terrorizing like these companies in the name of what? Stopping hate, I guess.
When the SPLC spearheaded that general cancel culture push. And so what you see in Minnesota is the downstream effects of what the SPLC really was at the forefront of. And even Mar-a-Lago was not immune. I remember in 2020, there was an event that was going to have Brigitte Gabriel with Act for America, and they canceled on her. Even Mar-a-Lago would listen to and cave to the SPLC's pressuring. That's how strong it was at that time. And so now, thank God the Trump administration is taking the SPLC to task, because now the SPLC is tasting one small bit of their own medicine with Vanguard and Fidelity saying that they'll no longer send matching grants. They'll no longer send donor advised funds to the SPLC. I'm like, well, now the shoe's on the other foot. Now you can see a little bit of what your debanking has been for conservatives.
Yeah, we can't forget. You said we cannot afford to forget. We couldn't even use the platform Eventbrite. We couldn't put our events. They would cancel us. There were payment platforms that we wouldn't be allowed to use. I think we have to remember what it was like during these dark times, where they were without the election of President Trump. They wanted to crush us in every possible way. They didn't want anyone to bank with us. They didn't want anyone to let us rent their facilities. They didn't want restaurants to cater to an event. They didn't want mortgage companies to work with us, credit card companies. They utterly wanted us canceled and ignored. And you can still see to this day, there'll be some social media piece where a Virginia Democrat will say, if it were up to me, I would have all Trump voters, they wouldn't be allowed to use a computer for 4 years as punishment for voting for Trump. That's their language. That is this socialist, Marxist, far left Democrat. They are not the old blue dog Democrats anymore. It's this far more radical group. And to that end, has the SPLC platformed some of these far left Democrats? Have they promoted them? Have they had conversations with them, like Ilhan Omar or AOC? Do they get involved in politics?
Yeah, SPLC has an action fund, 501c4, and they have, I believe it's John Ossoff is the main guy that they've backed so far. They started getting involved in school board races a few years ago. But yeah, I think I expect to see them becoming more aggressive. I mean, we have to see where the indictment shakes out. I think
Yes.
If they're actually held accountable, if they're found guilty, a lot of things are going to change about the SPLC.
Well, I can say that I put on social media that there was an event in which the SPLC brought in Ilhan Omar to talk about, to have a conversation, and it was before her election. And
I would not be surprised. I mean, SPLC has worked with the Council on American Islamic Relations for forever. And I mean, CARE, I'm a journalist and I want to be fair, but what we know for certain with CARE is that it was originally established by people with close ties to Hamas, and that its early seed money was connected to the Holy Land Foundation case that was financing terrorism. So that is, decades old, but CARE also is constantly platforming and defending radical Islamists who will spout anti-Semitic rhetoric, who will say things like Israel is an apartheid state, who will do and CARE bills itself as the largest Muslim civil rights organization in America. And they've long said that they don't support terrorism. So I want to be as fair as I can here, but they're also working hand in hand with the SPLC to silence any criticism of Islamism and radical Islam. So when it comes to having open debate and honest debate about the threat that we face from radical Islam, and I'm not talking about all Muslims, but the Muslims who want to bring Sharia to our civic law, these people are in lockstep with CARE, and CARE is defending them, and CARE does not want you to criticize them. That's where we are in this country. And so they're defending that while claiming to be upholding the rights of all Muslims. And, there are good Muslim reformers that I know, like M. Zudi Jasser down in Arizona, who want good Muslims who support American values to speak out against radical Islam. And he is finding it very difficult to do anything like that because groups like CARE are defending the bad actors. And so that's who the SPLC works with. So it doesn't surprise me. I have to look. I mean, this is the thing. I've studied the SPLC for years, and I wasn't aware of that Ilhan Omar event, but I'm going to be tracking it down. there, I have this motto with the SPLC: distrust but verify, because whenever they put anybody on the hate map, I almost assume that that person is not bad, but you have to make sure, because there are some churches on the hate map that actually call for the death penalty for people who identify as homosexual.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah.
that is egregious. That is not what
Mhm.
we stand for.
Yep.
We want people, like, I cannot say enough that is not mainstream, and I do not defend it.
No,
But,
neither do I.
but at the same time, they're also putting people on there who don't do anything like that at all, like the Family Research Council, which
Yes.
merely states old biblical positions and advocates for good family policy. And they're on a hate map with chapters of the Klan. So
Yeah.
like, we have to be careful. I stick my neck out for a lot of people who I know are on that hate map because they're fighting for good things and the SPLC wants to silence them. But
Yes.
not everybody on the hate map is good.
No, I mean, they have they do have the KKK, the Aryan Nation. I think they do.
And maybe a few groups they aren't funding.
Yes, a few groups they're not funding, and they do have actual though their actual influence I don't
Neo-Nazis.
think is very great. It's just it's the influence. Like, what influence do they have in society? Very little. But they that's the whole point. They're kind of exaggerating it, and then they're adding groups like ours to that mix, and unfairly and unjustly. But you wrote about concrete steps that Americans can take to hold the SPLC accountable. What are some of those steps, and what do you hope to see result from the congressional hearing that happens?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question, Scarlett. There are many places where you might have an impact that you aren't familiar with. So I want to say to everybody who's watching this that if you work at a company that works with Benevity is a software provider that offers services, and these are good services, by the way. Benevity allows companies to match grants to specific nonprofits and helps employees volunteer their time, their hours to serve charitable causes. This is a very good effort, but they also rely on the Southern Poverty Law Center to smear and exclude conservative and other people. And I don't think Benevity intentionally does this. Benevity claims, and so far we've been able to see this, that companies will be able to opt out and then no longer use the SPLC. So what I want you to do, if you work at a company that uses Benevity, or you know someone who does, ask them to go to the company and say, look, we know you use Benevity. Make sure you opt out of using the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map to screen potential recipients, because that hate map is not reliable and it smears good people and it excludes good causes from charitable dollars. That's a very easy step. I think a lot of us can do. It might be a little scary, but I think if you ask that, your company will essentially be forced to listen. And I wrote a book that's, I intend for my book to be a resource for you so that you can make these arguments. Another thing that I'm really proud that Moms for Liberty has done, and I want to see more of, is there are so many school districts across America that use Learning for Justice's social justice standards, or that in other ways partner with or use the materials of the Southern Poverty Law Center. If you see, so there's an organization called Defending Education that has a list of every single school district that is using this. If you can go to that list and see if your school district is there, and then make some time to go to your school board, and I'd love it if you'd bring my book, but hold my book up, note what the Southern Poverty Law Center is, and tell them why they should not be doing this anymore. There's a really excellent Maryland mom who did this. recently, 2 weeks ago, and
Rosalind
she
has
was
that.
so fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah,
You did great.
Rosalind. And so like she's a great model. That's another easy thing.
Mhm.
Well, I say easy thing. These are concrete steps that you can take. And I know it may be it may be a little tough. It will require a little bit of courage, but I think
Yes.
it will go a long way and people will pay attention.
Thank
The other
you.
thing, yeah, if there's any situation where someone brings up the Southern Poverty Law Center in discussion, or your kids are talking about it from school or something like that, if you would just mention that this group is biased and not reliable and puts, focus on the family, Moms for Liberty, Turning Point USA. I mean, I could go down the list, but I
Yeah.
think if people heard that focus on the family was put on a map with chapters of the Klan by this organization, they would really think twice about giving money to this organization, about supporting this organization. That's why I wrote the book. The whole point is to say, look, the SPLC is not reliable. And hopefully, I mean, this is extremely rose-tinted glasses here. But if the SPLC can be shamed into finally stopping this routine defamation and actually returning to some of the original work that it was established to do, which is
Yep.
representing poor people in the South legally, that would also be a big win for our culture, for our free speech culture in America. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to have to be forced to do this.
Yes.
But
When the SPLC works so closely with teachers unions and opposes educational freedom, the main beneficiaries who would be Black and brown children that live in the worst performing school districts in this country in the inner city, when they're opposed to that, how can they even look in the mirror and say we stand for social justice or we care about children who are underprivileged? They care more about politics when they cannot stand up and say, yeah, we need to give these parents a choice. We need to give them a raft to escape these failing public schools. But they force parents that are predominantly Spanish, they're Black, in inner cities like mine in Milwaukee, where I grew up. They limit any options. They basically say, no, you cannot have a choice. You cannot allow your child to escape this failing school system. And then they say that they support, the betterment of these kids. It just shocks me.
it's grotesque. And that's one of the aspects. I wrote about them opposing school choice back when I wrote the book in 2020, because for that exact reason, if you really care about providing a leg up to people who are stuck in these failing school districts, school choice is oftentimes the answer. And if we can support school choice by any means necessary, we should. I think the answer to your question is I think they believe, and look, the Great Awakening was a real thing. A lot of people legitimately work themselves into a lather thinking that critical race theory is real, thinking that America is still white supremacist, thinking that we are. And I mean, the levels to which you have to talk yourself to think this way are, extreme. But I do think people, they read specific stories that omit context. They get down into this notion that America's system is fundamentally racist, and therefore radical change has to happen. And this is like the main argument that the left has right now. They say that America is so racist that they have to have essentially permanent power to erode that racism, because otherwise it's going to remain stuck in this white supremacy. And it's beyond the pale, but it's the only argument you can really make, because, and I saw Gavin Newsom making this argument. He said anti-woke is anti-Black. And it's like, no, it's not. How many Black people have woken up from the lies of the woke ideology and are mad as hell about their kids being told that they're inherently oppressed
Yes.
because of their skin color in school. I mean, this is not a joke, and this is real, and this is why the parental rights movement exists.
Yes.
And there's a little part of me that is very scared for our country, because more of the good people who are standing up for parental rights, more of the good people who realize the threat of this woke ideology in education, are rightly taking their kids out of these schools. And then what happens, unfortunately, is that makes the system more geared toward the ideologies that we're all trying to escape. And so at what point, there is a mismatch here, and we have to fight to retake our school districts or to entirely replace them. And I don't know where the future is. That's one of the things that makes me very unsettled for this country, because I believe in school choice. I believe in people being able to raise their kids according to their own values. And the school system has been so co-opted by this Marxist, toxic, woke ideology that, like, I don't want anybody raised in the public schools today.
Yeah. And to be clear, you're not going to go into your child's classroom and there's not going to be brochures for SPLC or books SPLC. We're talking about the SPLC does professional development. I just did a deep dive into the Wisconsin Department of Education, and what I found was pretty shocking, but it's the recommendations. It's part of the standards. It's part of the resources that are provided, the professional development given to teachers. It is the way that the people who teach your children and the administrators that run school districts and the school boards that manage them, information is disseminated to them from the SPLC. They are directly quoting out of the Learning for Justice material, even if they don't know it. That material has been disseminated down to them. And many states' Department of Education, even in red states like Florida, it is very difficult to uproot what has been so entrenched institutionally. And so that's why we're saying Defending Ed did a tremendous investigation, but they, even with all of their effort, they didn't get them all, and they admit that. You can't possibly do it. And so the impetus is upon us to continue that work and to look to find it, to root it out, and to make your school board aware. Hey, are you aware that there is guidance in the board docs that references Southern Poverty Law Center and that they are under indictment? Maybe you should remove that. Maybe you should not be including that in your guidance or in your curriculum. And so what should parents do? This is a big question. What should parents do if they talk to a reporter? Let's say a parent's running for school board, or they're like tomorrow, I've got a list of local reporters that want quotes. What do they do if the reporter suddenly says, well, the Moms for Liberty is on the Southern Poverty Law Center hate map? What is a good response for just kind of the more average parent that hears this and maybe they become a little flustered and they're not sure what to say, and they don't want to say the wrong thing?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing to do is say the Southern Poverty Law Center hate map is not reliable. We know this because the SPLC themselves have removed people from it when they got things wrong. The SPLC has put on there groups that are not hateful by any stretch of the imagination. And I think you should tailor this to the reporter if you can, but focus on the family is a great one to emphasize. Many of them should also understand how ridiculous it is that Turning Point USA is on there. PragerU just makes 5-minute explanatory videos, and the SPLC decides to put them on a map with Klan chapters. If you're dealing with somebody who's more on the left, a great example might be Gays Against Groomers. Gays Against Groomers is a group of LGBT people who oppose sexualized lessons for children. Yes, there are lesbian and gay people who oppose pushing this ideology on kids,
Yes.
pushing particularly transgender ideology in schools. And these people, I may not always see eye to eye with them, but I am tremendously glad that they're willing to stand out and say, like, we don't support this.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
on the hate map. Groups of doctors. So there's an organization called Do No Harm, which is led by doctors and nurses. And these are people who want higher standards in medicine. They oppose critical race theory and they oppose gender ideology in medicine, which I think, we need to get those out of medicine stat, because they make medicine worse for all people, Black people included. The SPLC just did a report, 3 days, I think, or so ago, against Do No Harm, in which they claimed that Do No Harm was echoing white supremacists. I mean, it's just like, it is beyond the pale what they will say about these people.
Yes.
But, so that's doctors, that's lesbian and gay people, that's the oldest conservative Christian nonprofit, the biggest one in America, that has the biggest impact, Focus on the Family. They're on the hate map. You can say, look, I understand if you might think that some conservatives might be hateful, but you have to realize this is not a reliable organization. They're under indictment for a reason. They were funding some members of actual hate groups. And so this is not a reliable organization. Don't rely on them. And something like that, I mean, naturally, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that you could mention my book. I think I try to make a very good case in there. I actually start the book by one of my proudest moments as a journalist was when the Westboro Baptist Church attacked me because they said, anyway, it was kind of a silly thing, but people were protesting the Westboro Baptist Church saying, "You're a disgrace to Jesus." And I'm like, well, yeah, I think they are, because they go and they protest military funerals and they do like the worst things imaginable, but they're also not the Klan. And so even the Westboro Baptist Church, I'm not entirely sure they belong on a hate map with Klan chapters, but I was glad, because I'm the kind of journalist who writes it the way he thinks it is. And I do my research. And if you look at what I've done, there are crap ton of footnotes for a reason. I want to cite my sources. And so my work is intended to be the thing to point to say, like, look, this group is not reliable. Please reconsider.
And so I think that if you are a school board member or running for school board and you're a conservative, you should definitely get a copy of your book and read it, because this is something that you're going to hear a lot. And it's a good way to defend yourself when you need to, or at least just to have that knowledge that, yeah, like, I know the truth. I know what this organization is, what they're doing. And then you can also talk to others, maybe others who aren't sure, who are, moderate, or other conservatives who really don't, they thought the SPLC was a civil rights organization that, yeah, maybe they were to the left, but they had no idea how the depth of the depravity of that organization and the amount of scandal and corruption that they've been under for many years, and that they have become basically a tool for the far left, a tool to use for political power. So I think that when you have that knowledge, then you can adequately respond to those criticism, or you can just sort of, sometimes you just have to let it go. You have to just, do not engage and just keep fighting and let your reputation stand for itself. You never get in the mud. Always be respectful. Like Tyler said, there are some organizations that will claim to be conservative or claim to have our values, and they don't. They go way too far. They're way too extreme. But show how you're different, and eventually you will win. You win everyone over, and I think that's what we've done over the years by proving that we are respectful, that we are going to stand firm, but we're going to do so as joyful warriors, as we often say. We're not going to engage in any of sort of that the bad behaviors that we see on the other side, that we're going to win, but we're going to win with our dignity and with respect. So that's very, very important. Don't engage. And they will really try to get you to engage. They will do everything to push your buttons.
Yeah.
They will say terrible things about you, about your family. And you have to just maintain your composure and understand that this is a very small group of people. They do not reflect the vast majority of people. Again, it's very small. They're powerful, but small. So in closing,
let me encourage, let me encourage everyone who's listening just to say this simple message. You are not crazy. You are not hateful. Whatever they say about you, it is not true. And I think, you need to rest in that truth and remember that sometimes when they say the worst things about you, it's because you're over the target.
Yes.
There's so many great moms and dads, especially moms I've talked to over the years with Moms for Liberty, who have been demonized, but who stick with it and who show through their courage and compassion that they are truly good and that the other side is spreading lies about them. And that's one of the things I love about Moms for Liberty. And I want to encourage all of you to stay in the fight.
What did Harmeet Dillon say just a few weeks ago? She's not sure if you haven't been listed on the hate map by SPLC and you claim to be a culture warrior, you need to question how effective you are. Because you clearly aren't very effective if they haven't noticed you yet. You've been under the radar and you need to do more work. And I loved it. I was like, nailed it. Because if they haven't noticed you for the work that you're doing, the good work that you're doing, then maybe you need to reflect a little bit more, because we always say they smear who they fear. They go after those that are over the target. They go after those that are the most successful in competing with this woke ideology, because they're just trying to take us out. There's two ideologies in the ring, and one is going to prevail and the other is going to leave on a stretcher. And I am determined to be the one that prevails. I am determined that America stands and that our civilization prevails and freedom and liberty can be passed down to the next generation. So understanding that there is no backdoor to the Alamo and we have to win this, makes it easy to stay in the fight. So even against foes like the SPLC, in the end, the truth will out. And that's my TED Talk. Thank you so much, Tyler. And I wish you the best for tomorrow. I will be watching closely. I know you will do very well. You're going to be facing some interesting questioning. And I'm sure you're prepared for it, but it will make for some interesting news tomorrow, because we know how there's going to be certain members of the squad that'll definitely be gunning for you tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm excited for it, but I'm actually about to go do a session where it's called a murder board, where it's preparation for some of the harsh questions that we're surely to get. So, well, I know that you'll do great. We'll be praying for you tonight. Everyone say a prayer. It's an important day tomorrow because we want to expose the SPLC and we want justice and we deserve justice, and very grateful for the Trump administration and for members of Congress who are holding this hearing in the attempt to get justice for those who have been smeared by the manufactured lies of the SPLC. So thank you so much, Tyler. And I will have in the comments, where can people find your book or both of your books? Yes. So you can follow me on X at Tyler2 O'Neill. Making Hate Pay, The Corruption of the Southern Poverty Law Center is my first book. It came out in 2020, but I have a new edition, an update that just launched. So it should be available on Amazon. And also the Woke-to-Post, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government, also available on Amazon. On Audible, I recorded that one myself, very proud of it. But yeah, you can find those wherever books are sold. Find books. And by the way, the Daily Signal, I am not the only one on our fantastic team. We have Elizabeth Mitchell, who's constantly asking President Trump questions, with Pedro Rodriguez, who is holding the Center for American Islamic Relations, Council for American Islamic Relations feet to the fire. So we are tune into the Daily Signal. We have Tony Kinnett with his Tony Kinnett cast every evening on weekdays. So a lot of exciting things coming from the Signal. Get the Signal, not the noise.
Yes, follow them. I love them. I see Elizabeth in the White House press room. She does an amazing job. She always asks very good questions. She has very good exclusive interviews as well. She's a young lady to watch. She does very good work. And I love Tony. Just saw him at our last summit. He's great. He's a fellow Midwesterner. So
yes, he is.
Yeah, so follow Daily Signal. Thank you so much, Tyler. The best of luck tomorrow. I know I'll be watching and we'll be streaming. So if you would like to watch this, tune into our socials. And I'm sure pretty much this is going to be streamed on pretty much every channel on X tomorrow. So I think it'll be, if you're interested in it, watch it and learn a lot. So thank you, Tyler. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Scarlett.
Bye. That was a great conversation with Tyler O'Neill, and I wish him the best of luck tomorrow. I'll definitely be watching that hearing. For me, exposing the Southern Poverty Law Center is not theoretical. I lived what happens when a powerful organization like that brands ordinary parents as extremists. That label did not stay on a website. It followed me and many other moms into their lives. It followed us into news stories, interviews, local politics, community conversations, and even my personal life. I was harassed, I was doxxed, I was sued, and again, the same line appeared in coverage about me, that I was a leader of Moms for Liberty, and Moms for Liberty was a group that the SPLC labeled as extremist. That kind of label changes how people look at you. It changes how they speak to you. It changes how they justify treating you. It gives bad actors permission to treat you very badly and dehumanize you. And it's wrong. The SPLC claimed that they were tracking hate. Really? Or were they funding it? They have now been proven to be a fraudulent organization, and years of accusations about impropriety and fraud and all the things that I discussed with Tyler, they're finally available for the whole world to see. Finally, people are opening their eyes to the truth about the Southern Poverty Law Center. It is not an organization fighting for civil rights and fighting to end race discrimination. It is an organization fighting to perpetuate that kind of view of the world through a lens of race. It is an organization that is fueling hate, not fighting against it. I agree with Tyler when he says that the SPLC engages in reputational warfare, and they do. It is reputational warfare against parents or any other conservatives that refuse to bend the knee to woke gender ideology or critical race theory. Any of us who stand and say, I love America. It's not perfect, but it's the best country on this planet, and I'm proud to be an American. They consider that hateful. I consider that patriotism and honorable. And now I'm so happy that Congress has questions. It is time for a reckoning, well past time. No organization should be able to smear moms and dads and endanger families, to distort public debate, and then hide behind the language of civil rights while doing it. It is not hateful to protect children. It is not hateful to love your country. It's not extreme to ask questions, to demand answers, and to fight for what you believe is right. I will not be silent while powerful institutions try to manufacture hate against parents brave enough to stand in the way, and I hope that you will join me. So thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to the hearing tomorrow, and have a great day.